Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a closer look at Pakistan's fight against terrorism, particularly in the aftermath of the Jaffa Express railway incident, which of course is something very, very integral to Pakistan's fight against terrorism, and the fact that this is emanating from outside of the country, with of course the terrorists also cooperating and coordinating with the people and their handlers in Afghanistan, something of course that has been garnered evidence for. And of course DGISPR also after this attack has spoken about how there is credible evidence in this regard, with of course also this being sponsored by India. At the same time, we've also seen that action has been taken with regards to talking about what needs to be the next step and the ways in which we're going to be dealing with this threat regionally, particularly the safe havens that are being provided in Afghanistan. This is something that has been communicated to Afghanistan also in terms of an explanation being demanded with regards to this particular attack and the ways in which the cooperation has resulted from within Afghanistan. But what does that mean, particularly in terms of the action that can be taken potentially with the Afghan Taliban regime, how previous action points or approaches are going to work or not, and what other options Pakistan has with regards to the ways we've seen that this particular setup exists as per the UN Security Council report as well, the Global Terrorism Index report as well, and with regards to the ways, of course, that we have seen a lack of responsibility being taken for the use of Afghan soil against Pakistan. So in this scenario, what are going to be the ways forward for Pakistan? At the same time, we're also going to be taking a look at the fight against terrorism within the country and the aspects and dynamics that are involved with regards to how we're going to be dealing with this at home, with of course implementation of the National Action Plan and its 14 points, and of course in the ways that all parties are going to be garnered together with reference to this particular fight, and whether or not the National Security Committee of the Parliament's meeting tomorrow is going to help, and whether or not there is going to be an all parties conference that parties in Pakistan will be attending and taking seriously. And of course, with regards to the international community, whether or not we can look at partners such as the US and Russia for help in this regard. That is going to be our focus in today's show. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal. We've also been joined online by former Ambassador Mr. G.R. Baluch. Thank you very much, Ambassador Saab, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. And I'm going to start with you with reference to what we have seen happen with Afghanistan previously as well. We, of course, know that safe havens exist. We know that Afghan soil is being used against Pakistan. As per the UN report, we also know that there is, of course, operational support being also provided to these terrorist organizations, particularly the TTP as well, and of course, which has been also reportedly being talked about as an umbrella organization that can have threats to the region as well. So in all of this scenario, and particularly after the attack in Balochistan, I want your take on what Pakistan can possibly do in this regard. It has been communicated, reportedly, of course, with reference to what Pakistan has done in the aftermath, that they have called in for an explanation with regards to what has happened in Balochistan. But how much of this engagement will actually help in our fight against terrorism?
Thank you, Sara, for this show. I think today where we stand in this struggle to fight terrorism, now it is like 4 decades, but I think it's an entirely different stage where I think I would say the gravest, I think, threat that Pakistan today faces in terms of its security. And the reasons are several. What has happened that several forces, international, regional, and internal, have converged, and those forces have a incidental, accidental, or perhaps under some scheme, a coordinated or a coincidental onslaught on Pakistan's security. Now, I would tend to think that we must understand the threat itself. I think we have to look at the threat from at 3 levels. One is the international terrorism, which was actually, which we saw in the world spread after, of course, after 9/11, and then what happened to Afghanistan, what happened to Iraq, and the emergence of IS, Khorasan. So several elements from all over the world, they converged, and set up these outfits which have now uh, a global agenda, which are probably also funded by global actors and non-actors. So, and unfortunately, they seem to have also zeroed on us. Uh, and the reason is perhaps that they do get safe havens in, in, in Afghanistan. The second level of terrorism that Pakistan faces is the religious terrorism. And that religious terrorism emanates, unfortunately, some of it from our own territory, from our own madrasa, some other institutions which went to the other side, and of course, and they are inspired by what happened in Afghanistan. So now they feel that if Taliban can really defeat a superpower and establish a caliphate or emirate of Islam, of Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, why can't they do it? I mean, those are people who completely reject Pakistan's democratic and progressive constitution and the way the state runs. And of course, now the most lethal uh, element which has been added to this three-pronged threat that Pakistan is the nationalism and sub-nationalism and ethnic terrorism in Balochistan. So all these three factors are now a very, very grave threat that Pakistan has ever faced. Let's not close our eyes. This is the gravest threat ever faced by Pakistan. Yes, our forces, our institution, our state is up to defeating all these people, but we must not, I repeat it, must not uh, sort of ever consider this threat can be dismissed. Uh, just it's a big challenge that as a nation we have to do it. We have to uh, marshal our regional, our international efforts, the international diplomacy, and of course the internal strength that we have to really marshal so that we are able to withstand those pressures which come when you have such a threat. So, Sana, I would say that we have to focus as a nation on these three prongs of the attack on Pakistan's state, and then each one actually requires a comprehensive response, which we will discuss as we proceed in your discussion. Yes, Sana.
Right, absolutely. And Faisal, I want you to take on that as well because we, of course, know that there were reassurances given previously. There is, of course, a Doha agreement. We've seen the U.S. troop withdrawal happen, and we've had discussions around how there is a humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. There is potential instability, and that, of course, represents the entire community. There's also, of course, the fact that there hasn't been any formal recognition because those reassurances haven't been met. And in terms of all of this instability, we've also seen that there are safe havens now for terrorist organizations, and Pakistan, of course, has a direct impact from that. So, given this current scenario and the way that the international community is actually looking at Afghanistan right now and Pakistan right next to it, what will be our levels of engagement in terms of how we deal with the Afghan Taliban regime, given the fact that we have done so previously, and the fact that, unfortunately, in a lot of ways, that hasn't been successful, and then also in terms of what regional or international help or assistance can be provided.
Yes, and obviously when we talk about the menace we are of course facing right now, Pakistan has been fighting against terrorism since more than 20 years, and when Taliban took over, I mean, as a goodwill gesture, Pakistan extended all support in terms that there was humanitarian crisis. Then we know that people were at large and they were facing bad weather, they were facing floods as well, and in that whole scenario, of course, Pakistan has been helping them out, and in terms of even attracting the world powers as well to, of course, address the humanitarian crisis, only because of one reason, and that was that whatever the pledges they have made in Doha Accord, like they would never be allowing their land to be used against any of the neighboring countries, including Pakistan, for the terrorism purposes. Then inclusivity of the government they pledged at that time, and then the third one was the women rights and the human rights they would be, of course, delivering to their own people. Of course, Pakistan stood with them, but with the passage of time, the reality of the current Taliban, those who have been, of course, portraying that they will be, of course, in compliance with whatever the pledges they have been making, they started showing the tendencies that they are not at all that kind or 2.0 Taliban, which we could consider them, that they have moved on from their past and now they want to see a new horizon, a new future for themselves. That is not the case at all. But currently, in recent times, I mean, I remember I have been talking about it since 3 months, that there are infightings amongst Taliban, there are grudges against each other, and there are groups within Taliban, TTA I'm talking about. Of course, there is Haqqani network. Of course, there is a very prominent leader, a progressive leader that is considered as someone hailing from, of course, Kabul side, and that is Mullah Abbas Tanikzai. And when we talk about the stronghold of the group that hails from Kandahar and sits in Kabul right now, I'm talking about Mullah Akhundzada, and then Mullah Yaqub, who happens to be son of Mullah Umar. Mullah Yaqub is not even having good terms with Mullah Akhundzada. What are the reasons behind it? We have to probe it. We know that there are factions within TTA who believe that progressive Afghanistan, in terms of human rights, in terms of their land not to be used against any of the neighboring countries, these sort of people, whether they do have any say within their ranks or not, or of course there are people like Haqqani network people. They are of course being neglected. They have been playing pivotal role in terms of their stronghold Jalalabad. That is very important when we talk about countering Kunnad, countering Nangarhar, countering Nuristan, which are considered as the stronghold of TTP. Of course, TTP is getting catered out there, and of course, when we talk about all of these factions, we need to assess where does different factions stand within TTA and what Pakistan could do in that context. That of course countries like China, who are having a business to do in Afghanistan right now, and of course there are countries, very important countries that are considered, though they are very far from Afghanistan, but still, as they have many stakes within Central Asian republics, they are considered as very important in the region. And of course, I'm talking about Russia. And when I talk about Iran, of course, they have a lot to do with Afghanistan as well. All of these countries, of course, Pakistan needs to sit with them, and Pakistan needs to sit with the neighboring countries in terms of Central Asian republics as well, the leadership from there. And of course, we have to talk with Taliban that this is not the way to go along with the things. If somebody on our eastern neighbor is actually offering them in terms of monetary gains, this doesn't mean that they should allow their land to be used against any sort of facilitations, any sort of facilitation in terms of TTP, BLA, BLF, because footprints of all of these terrorists, whenever they do something, of course they come from Afghanistan, they do their activities, they go back to Afghanistan, whoever are safe. Whoever are saved. Otherwise, Pakistan security forces are making sure that whoever enters in the bad intentions in Pakistan, of course, they are killed. As we saw that last week, of course, in that Jafar Express incident, 33 of them who were there, of course, they were eliminated. They were sent to hell, and that has been happening. And when we talk about their arms, of course, they are the very arms Americans left in Afghanistan. How they are reaching out, how they are being sold to them, that is another question which needs to be addressed by the TTA sitting in Kabul. When we talk about Indian presence in there, and in Jafar Express incident, of course, the terrorists, they were fully intact with somebody sitting inside Afghanistan. Who was there, where was he, and who has been facilitating from within the Taliban regime itself. So these are big question marks that needs to be addressed, that needs to be asked from TTA, and this is the way forward. And when we talk about how other factors we could use, of course, we can that we have been doing in past as well, and we must do it and carry on doing it, and that is related to, of course, bust their sanctuaries, bust their schools where are learning all of this terrorism. that needs to be carried out in within the borders of Afghanistan, within the land of Afghanistan, because this is where the terrorism is, of course, originating from, and Pakistan needs to address that. And diplomatic side needs to be covered as well, and the local diplomatic side, which is the jirga, strong level jirgas, that needs to be of course sent in there as well, so that if there is any iota of sense left within the ranks of Afghan Taliban, that can be, of course, shaken up, and that can be talked to. If they ever had one, they must be talked to. These are the avenues that Pakistan still needs to explore. Pressure, diplomatic pressure, that needs to be implemented and applied. And when it comes to economic side, of course, Pakistan needs to put the foot down when it comes to, of course, whatever the imports Afghanistan is doing from Pakistan in terms of food items, in terms of many other items that are of daily use, that needs to be put a cap on. And when there will be a cap on it, of course, they will realize that there is a pressure, economic pressure, diplomatic pressure, and then local pressure as well, and they will be opening their eyes and addressing the addressing all of the questions which are being raised by Pakistan.
Right, and Farrukh, I want your take on that as well, in terms of when we talk about the potential avenues of diplomatic channels that we can use. Hasn't that been done already, and whether or not there are certain areas that we can explore? For example, what sort of diplomatic engagement will there be on a government level, or on the level of jirgas, as Faisal is proposing? Is that a workable solution? Will that work, especially in a scenario where we say we have zero tolerance policy for anybody who is involved in terrorist activities, or anybody who in fact is supporting those terrorist activities, which we know the Afghan Taliban regime is. So I want your take on how then will these diplomatic channels actually work?
Thank you very much, Sanam. I think that Afghan conflict has been going on since 1979. Since when has any jirga or any diplomacy worked? I don't think that that is the answer. And also this idea of actually finding a good Taliban out of bad Taliban, right? This habit of ours to actually affect some kind of a desire to affect some kind of regime change in Kabul. It reminds me of a personal anecdote when I was a young boy. And we used to play tennis, in a club. And the biggest problem was at that time, the manager of that club was really, really harsh. So there was a deputy also, and he actually used to say that, look, you guys have influence, why don't you actually make sure that I become a manager, then you're going to get everything right. And the moment he was a replacement. Naturally, we couldn't do much. But the moment he became manager, he was the tougher one. And later on, the manager, old manager, told us that it was he who used to egg us on, right? So you have no visibility, and you can keep on dreaming about this kind of change. Whosoever comes will keep on doing exactly the same thing. Now, enough talk about Afghanistan. First, talk about our own fight against terrorism. I think that there are bugs in our system that actually keep on compromising our ability to fight back. By the way, if you want to actually connect India and Afghanistan, then you'll have to ask, why is it that all of a sudden there's so much intensity in these attacks? That would actually speak to certain changes in the world. Of course, Donald Trump's changed, and of course, there was a change in Pakistan also. Leadership, military leadership also changed. We know about the previous army chief who was actually content with every kind of deadlock, but this leadership wants to actually change things for the better. So it means that there is this sense among the enemy that there's this quasi-doctrine, use it or lose it, that whatever leverage they have, they are going to actually use it immediately. And that is where the intensity is increasing. Pakistan needs to know how to actually fight back. Now the debugging. Every time, and this is the cardinal problem with our National Action Plan as originally envisaged. It saw three conflicts in its separate light. And I would actually request you to actually go and use abductive logic here, abductive reasoning. And what exactly is that? There is a thing called duck test. If it quacks like a duck, if it looks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, it is a duck. Who is a terrorist? Anybody who actually uses terror to terrorize people and to actually undermine the state. Now tell me, if whatever back then was happening in Karachi, whatever was happening in Balochistan, and whatever was happening in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, were they not in unfolding in the similar fashion? So why should the state of Pakistan actually have different standards for different conflict zones? Every time Balochistan erupts, most of our liberal friends actually keep on talking about how these are repressed feelings and there's grievances. Of course, there are grievances. Everybody has grievances, right? We are sitting in Islamabad, Sana. Has the state of Pakistan come to you or I and asked, Zinda bhi ho ya mar gaya, right? The fact is that this country has had resource shortages. So, of course, there are going to be grievances. So, what do? Do you immediately start talking about grievances and not actually fight back, or do you first contain the problem and then talk about it? The first thing is this. Second, once you have understood the psychology of conflict, and by the way, I keep on hearing that you have to negotiate with Balochistan's the sub-nationalist or terrorist. Of course, anybody who says this should volunteer to go to them unarmed, unconditionally, to actually approach the negotiations. If they think that the other side is only has genuine grievances and does not actually act as a shield for foreign powers, then I'm okay with it. Otherwise, first you'll have to contain these people who have been killing our citizens, our soldiers. Remember, if I'm stranded with the terrorists someday, they take me hostage, it is the state of Pakistan which will come to my rescue, nobody else will. So we have to first take care of that. Now, once you have actually understood the psychology and you have understood the shape of threat, then you have to expand your vision, right? You have to see who else might be involved. We know that Afghanistan soil is being used, but is there no other country apart from India that might have some kind of interest in whatever is going on? There's a third country, right? It's called Iran. If it has proxies all over the world, is there a possibility that they might also have some skin in this game? Of course, we want to trust them, and this has been the case. But we know that Mubarak Hussain Patel was caught where and what exactly happened. Now the question is, if they had any kind of leverage, are they going to leave it aside or just throw it? Would you? I would. So you have to consider all these possibilities. First of all, debug your system, build resolution that you're going to go after terrorists no matter what. Then you have to harden the border. And of whatever is happening in Afghanistan, you can find a way. Unfortunately, every time we talk about Afghan Taliban, our response, if we want to take out certain terrorists in Afghanistan, is of shock and awe. We have to actually flash our credentials and say that, look, we are going to do it, and see, here's the card. We leave our business card. Don't do it. Usually good espionage takes place when people that are against you actually fall dead for no reason. If you think that there are terrorists on the other side of the border, take care of it. Don't actually advertise to the world, just take them out. Right? Is it that difficult a thing? Because every argument, everything you use, you have listened to Narendra Modi yesterday. They actually have the way to subvert it and pervert it and use it against you. That shouldn't be the case.
Right. Ambassador Sab, I want your perspective on this too, with reference to how do we unify the approach at home with what we're doing outside, because while we talk about the issue of terrorism and we talk about Afghanistan, there's a lot that's going on at home as well. And do you think that we have that coordinated unified strategy in terms of dealing with Afghanistan and in terms of dealing with these terrorist organizations within our own country as well. We also know that the National Action Plan is something that we keep referring to, hasn't really unfortunately been implemented in full letter and spirit. There's also a consensus that we keep referring to, which still seems to be something that's missing, with the National Security Committee meeting of the Parliament due tomorrow as well, with conflicting reports coming in on whether all parties are going to be attending or not. So given the history of our consensus or lack thereof in terms of what we're going to do about this situation and how we're going to fight this war, where do we stand now in terms of that strategy, and what needs to be the unified approach in this regard?
Sana, I'll just say that again, in other words, that first of all, the people of Pakistan have to be informed about the gravity of the situation. Believe me, our state, our nation is under siege. Forget, let's not just like close our eyes and say, no, we can fight it out. These are 30 people, 35 people. No, that's not the case. One. So first of all, we all have to realize the gravity of the situation. And you are so right that let's see if all the political parties come to this briefing tomorrow in the Parliament, the in-camera session. If there's some political elements they choose not to come, it means we have not yet succeeded in having a national narrative on which we all agree in terms of the gravity of the situation. After we all agree on the gravity of the situation, then is the time that we have to really come up with a comprehensive national plan. Forget about those old NAPs, National Action Plan, which did not work. It means it did not work. Not that we didn't implement. There was something wrong, some flaw in its conceptualization and its implementation. So let's do it. Let's go back to the drawing board again. I would say all those who have the power, whether it is the political leadership or the security institutions, intelligence institutions, press, media, intellectuals, let's all go back to the drawing board. In my view, our basic previous approaches have failed. The fact is that the terrorism, instead of decreasing, has increased. The fact that the people of Pakistan feel more vulnerable is a testimony to my statement that we have failed to respond to this gravity of the terrorism threat that Pakistan faces today. So first of all, we must realize, all of us, all political parties, all stakeholders, each one of us, and then it is the duty of the political leadership to get that national resolve to fight this grave situation that we are faced with. We must not forget the hybrid warfare, the fifth generation warfare. It is there. We are already facing those enemies. They don't come actually with their own national flag today and come and attack your state and your institutions, your people and your infrastructure. They use these proxies, these dispensable people who are there. So we really have to go back to the drawing board at the international level, when it is the diplomacy at the international level. Of course, we have to raise our voice in the Security Council. Why not to work for a Security Council resolution with regard to this menace now emanating from Afghanistan? Let the world say it loud and clear to Afghan Taliban that you have to stop it. You have to stop it, because if it's not stopped at Pakistan, Pakistan is literally, it's not metaphoric that the front line against terrorism, but it really is. It is our geography. What can we do? If Afghanistan happens to be the epicenter of terrorism, Pakistan is their front line and the front in the front trench. That happens to be like that. It's not a choice, but that's how the geography dictates. And unfortunately, we were so bad at managing our own house that we have this threat now embedded into our narratives, into our social media, into our political parties. We are a polarized society, unfortunately. There's no consensus of understanding of the threat. What to talk of a national strategy. So I think a lot of work has to be done. That's the time that political leadership has to show leadership. the state, and they have to show that big thinking that requires in such grave situations and national crisis. And then, of course, our security institutions, our writers, our social media activists, our media, electronic media, our print media, we all have to be on the same page. Only then we can really fight this virus. Yes.
Right. Ambassador Saab, I also want your take in terms of when we talk about this issue, there's also the fact that we're looking towards what sort of collaboration or potential can possibly exist coming in from the US. Given, of course, that there is the US troop withdrawal, given that Pakistan has been lauded most recently in terms of its support against terrorism. However, we've still seen action taken, for example, with regards to visa restrictions. There is, of course, also a scenario which we know exists where we don't see the US in the region anymore, and they've, of course, stepped out of the equation. But I want your take in terms of what Pakistan can do with regards to looking towards external support with reference to not just Afghanistan, but also threats and evidences coming in from India and the involvement that we see of acts of terrorism in the region.
Definitely, I think Americans have indicated in tangible terms Pakistan cooperated in getting the person arrested who was behind the killing of that blast that took place at the time of the withdrawal. So I think, and the very fact that the Trump too, President Trump in his inaugural address appreciated Pakistan. So it means there is a space, there is a scope for collaboration and cooperation. And I'm sure our state institutions, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as well as our other security institutions must have developed on that. So I think that needs to be done, maybe not in the glare of the public, but what has to be done should be done, and I'm sure they must be busy with that. But I think it is to be more than the US. It has to be other four permanent members as well. China is on our side. Russia is on our side. I'm sure France and Britain are with us. So are the other non-permanent members. So I think we should get a Security Council resolution passed against this terrorism, which is traced back to several actors within the region. Of course, we don't want to name names, but it should be like we have to make a case where we prove to the world that it's not only Pakistan. Pakistan is just in the front, but this menace, if not checked today, would spread to all over the world, as it was, unfortunately. So I think, and Pakistan being a nuclear state, big state, strategically located state, if they are able to destabilize by imprudent policies of other regional actors, by using these non-state actors, that will be a grave miscalculation for the cause of peace in this region and in the world. And that's kind of a thesis that probably has to be worked on at the international level. But I think the immediate neighbors have to be really engaged. They should have been engaged yesterday. Iran, Afghanistan. Of course, we should talk to Afghanistan. China, Central Asian states, Turkey. Anybody who has some leverage on the Taliban, and of course the US, also at the international level. But I think we should start from the region and then enhance it to the global level. But most importantly,
when you say the region as well, I want to know what do you mean in terms of what support can exist? What sort of support can exist in the region?
It is not support in that way, but you have to build a consensus that yes, Taliban are in violation of the agreement they signed in Qatar.
Does that consensus already exist? Who disagrees with the fact that the assurance hasn't been met?
But we see very, very friendly countries of ours. They are completely like deep down engaging with Afghan Taliban regime without putting the condition of their fulfillment of this very big commitment. So that has to be stopped. You see, you have to hit where it hurts. if they're not hurt, our very friendly countries, they go ahead with signing long-term projects. I don't want to name them, but we all know. We all know. So I think we have to at least make our point that this kind of an engagement has to be conditional. It cannot be unconditional. Yes, the formal recognition has been held back for various reasons, but de facto, lots of countries are engaged with them. A lot of regional countries with the economic collaboration, a lot of development work going on, a lot of money coming in. So I think that has to be worked at. If the international community can put FATF on us, I mean, how you justify money coming in from any source to this regime which has not fulfilled its commitment? So I think we really have to come up with tangible narratives which can be convincing, based on evidence, based on facts on the ground. And I'm sure, as you all were discussing, that as far as the information about Afghanistan is concerned, I think nobody knows better than Pakistan in terms of what infrastructure, where it happens. So I think there is, of course, a need for us to also do our bit. We have to do our bit as well to, what they call it, nip the, to preempt them before they are operationalized. If we have tangible information, we shouldn't be shy of acting. So the time of acting has come, time of gesture is gone, time of verbose is gone, time of just platitude is gone. Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ambassador Javaid Baluch, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. Faisal, I want your take on that, with what the Ambassador was referring to in terms of how this is time for action, and also in terms of regional players being involved. And I understand that there are dynamics going on irrespective of the official recognition of the Afghan Taliban regime. But then, in light of that, what the Ambassador was also mentioning in terms of building that narrative, or building that credible evidence and putting it forward, how will that actually then help, even given the fact that this is something that is being provided at large, both by Pakistan, coming in from the UN as well, something that exists in terms of the knowledge of the international or regional community. And so despite that, if there are of course other forces or other reasons behind the actions that are being taken, what will the narrative building do?
Yes, and obviously when we talk about the statement earlier by Ambassador Javaid Baluch, I would fully endorse that if the world would come to know about this fact, that the neighboring countries of Afghanistan are still of course seeing that threat, and of course terrorism is still at full swing, then why would they be going ahead with having any kind of relations with a country like Afghanistan? I mean, forget about few big names who are already involved in there, in terms of course sending them aid, or in terms of doing business with them. Now, of course, very recently, I mean last month, India mediated in between Afghan Taliban and Japan. On what basis? That needs to be of course explored. And if Japan is ready to accept Afghanistan or Taliban regime as a legit regime that must be having control of Afghanistan, and on what terms they are sitting with them, and on what terms India is mediating on behalf of Afghan Taliban with the rest of the world. And I think that needs to be explored, and what gains they want to have. Of course, we know that India, since a long time, it has been utilizing Pakistan's western border as a proxy, in terms that it can engage Pakistan's forces out there, so that the initial focus that we have been traditionally seeing Pakistan always had towards eastern neighbor India, that they want to be of course shifted towards the western border. I think that needs to be explored. And if Indian diplomats or Indian nationals like Nikhil Gupta, if they are getting caught in the western countries, of course paying amounts for somebody's assassination, or trying to stage an assassination, and that is called exporting terrorism. India has been exporting terrorism, not even to Pakistan, but of course to the rest of the world as well. And if they are still doing it, and CIA endorses these kind of statements. When I say that India is involved in, of course, investing and facilitating the terrorism in Pakistan, of course, CIA itself claims that India does it. If these are the statements that they have been, of course, endorsing, then why on earth a country like America, that believes in democracy, that believes in human rights, that believes in countering terrorism, is actually letting India go do whatever it likes in the region and do wherever it wants to invest in terms of terrorism? How they can let it go? And I think G.R. Baluch, Ambassador G.R. Baluch has rightly pointed out that we have to, of course, go to United Nations Security Council, get this resolution passed. Of course, it affects the whole world. If it doesn't, the countries that would say no to this resolution, then of course in future anything happens to them, in terms that if Al-Qaeda can do something in past sitting in Afghanistan, that who knows, ISIS Khorasan could do something against them countries as well. And if they do, then we would tell them that there was a time when we asked you to do something about it and you said no. Now of course it is your war, you do it. Now you shouldn't be expecting anything from Pakistan at all. And I think this is the time that we must go for that resolution. And if once that is passed, of course we need to tell the world that stay away from Afghan Taliban.
Right. Yes, Farrukh.
Right. Ambassador Saab actually very graciously included media into the list of people who should be engaged on the matter. I think that it is important to also highlight that if you're going to build consensus, new consensus on terrorism, then you need countries' judiciary and diplomatic corps also be invited in that. And I think instead of media intellectuals, what you need is media owners. The state of Pakistan understands that, and I hope that that is what happens. Now, regarding debugging, Sana, I couldn't care less what happens in Kabul, as long as they're not attacking us. If they do, we have to foil that. But internally, just imagine, for 4 years, Afghan Taliban, almost 4 years, Afghan Taliban have been in power, and we did not perhaps know, or this news did not surface, that America is, continuously paying them money, right? What does it mean? It means that we have blind spots. Why would you have blind spots, Sana? Because there is some kind of intelligence, blind spot created by certain people inside Pakistan. So what you need is counterintelligence also, to get rid of all the people who keep on compromising your national security by shaking hands or delivering news to the enemy, and then blocking our vision also. Without counterintelligence, Sana, nothing will happen. Whatever you do today, whatever you gain today, will be lost tomorrow by our successors. Why? Because that problem of leakages and compromises will continue.
Right. Thank you, Farrukh, and thank you, Faisal, for joining us and being a part of the debate as always. That's all that we have time for. We'll now see you tomorrow.